I knew how to do it. I knew which tone to use. I knew which like questioning techniques to use, like how to run people through the system that we followed. Like I knew all of it intellectually. But the problem was I just wasn't doing it very effectively, or I wasn't doing it at all. And avoiding it or getting creative in my procrastination. And for whatever reason, I just was not tapping into even a small portion of my potential, of my impact, of my effect. And as I began to dig more into my own, being, I realized how much my being was limiting me from doing.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Kremer. What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the... What is up, y'all? Welcome back to this episode of the Rising Leader Podcast. And if this is your first time joining us on the show, we welcome you. We are so grateful for you to be here. This is your host, Alex Kremer. As always, I am joined by, this is part two of an earlier podcast with the amazing, incredible, not only really good looking, very intelligent, very humorous, Mr. Chris Caldwell. What's up, Chris?
Thanks, man. I appreciate you reading out the introduction that I wrote for you.
I was going to say, that was what am I doing here? That's about me.
What's up, man? It's good to be back on the pod.
Oh, man, I'm grateful to be here. I almost am feeling like we should just make it so that we are doing a podcast like once a month or something like that. Have like a little bit more of a consistent basis. So I'm not saying that there's a lot of pressure on how well you do on this podcast will determine whether or not I invite you back, but
Yeah. Well, you know what, man? I'm a 10. I'm a 10, whether you invite me back on or not. My self-worth isn't wholly reliant upon it, but I wouldn't lie. It would hurt my feelings a little bit if I was never back on.
I appreciate the vulnerability and the authenticity within that share. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No problem, man.
So for those who don't know, Chris is the founder and the CEO of Sell As You Are, or as the locals say, Saya. He is one of the best sales trainers that I know. He is also the chief sales trainer of a little known company called Alluviance. And Chris and I have gotten to know each other extremely well over the past 9-10 months. We've thrown retreats together. We've had way too many Zoom calls together. We have gone to retreats together. We both study under the same teacher, a guy named Rob Renahan. I was out in California staying with you and your 3 kids like a month ago. Ate Mexican food, I think, every single meal. I mean, we're in it, man. We're doing this.
Yeah. We're in it, man. Yeah, it was great to have you out here, and it's been a bit of a crazy ride so far, and like as you like to say, Alex, it's just the beginning of the beginning. These are the good old days, and we're just in them, figuring things out and feeling into what feels right.
Mm-hmm. These are good old days. That does remind me of one of my favorite songs by Macklemore, Good Old Days, where it's actually my Vision song. And I know that you know this, but for those who are listening, I have a Vision playlist that when I listen to it, it reminds me of what am I doing? What's kind of the vision with which we're moving to? And one of them is Good Old Days by Macklemore. And one of the reasons why I love it is so often as sales professionals, as leaders, as founders, whatever it is, we are very, very focused on going after our goals, achieving, doing, creating, right? Even as a sales rep, I am going to be successful once I hit quota, right? It's always in the future. And one of the reasons why I love Good Old Days is Macklemore talks about in this song that, hey, once he's already gotten his name up in lights, it's when he looks to the past at the very, very beginning where he's like, oh man, before anybody knew me, before anything like that, before I was going to these weird shows just to try to get my name out there, that was the time that it was meant to be alive. And I think that brings us to what kind of one of the key things we wanted to talk about here on this call, which is how do we as sales reps, leaders, or founders both do and be at the same time? Do and be. It's a paradox. And this was actually when we were in California on your big ass whiteboard. We did a big triangle, and on one side of the triangle we said do, and one side of the triangle we said be, and it was like, what's the combination between these two things? And so I first just want to toss it over to you, and I'll let you kind of get kick started on this topic here of the sacred combo, the sacred third between doing and being.
Man. Yeah, I think that, I mean, it sounds really simple, right? Which is the best part of it, because usually to be able to grab hold of things, to chew them up, to swallow them, to process them, like there has to be some simplicity to it. So like combining the being and the doing sounds pretty simple, but being can mean so many things. So, in my sales career, one of the things I struggled with is that I knew exactly what to do. I knew what to say. I had coaches, I had mentors, I had people, I had scripts. Like I knew what to do. I knew how to do it. I knew which tone to use. I knew which questioning techniques to use, like how to run people through the system that we followed. Like I knew all of it intellectually. But the problem was I just wasn't doing it very effectively, or I wasn't doing it at all. And avoiding it or getting creative in my procrastination. And for whatever reason, I just was not tapping into even a small portion of my potential, of my impact, of my effect. And as I began to dig more into my own, being, I realized how much my being was limiting me from doing. Right? Like I was not being, I did not have the belief systems that supported the vision and the goals that I have for myself. I did not have the belief systems that supported the role that I was trying to play as a trainer and consultant for these different companies. I was not being the person that I needed to be in order to do the things I needed to do. And we all, if you've ever played sports, you've experienced that, right? You've experienced like warming up for a game when you're just like, yeah, let's go. Like I can do, like you have a belief system that fully supports, right? I know you play baseball, Alex. Like I'm sure there were days where you're like looking over, seeing the pitcher warm up and you're like, bro, like this guy, I'm going to just rake off this guy.
I'll be honest.
And then there are
I wasn't that good of a hitter, so usually that wasn't. I was better of a pitcher than anything. So.
Oh, great. Okay, so maybe other guys were thinking that about you.
I wonder what that's like.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But right, it's like, well, I'm sure there were times, when batters will walk into the batter's box where you're like, yeah, I got this guy. Like, this is no problem. Or another batter will walk in, you're like, man, I hope this guy just like really messes up and grounds out, And it's that being. And, I used to coach golf back in a previous career. And one of the kids on my team, he was one of the best golfers in the whole state of Maryland. He played at the University of Maryland. And I remember, and this is how twisted my definition of like humility was. I remember he was wildly confident, like insanely confident. And he never put anyone down. He was unbelievably kind, still is, charitable, really incredible kid. Never put anyone down. But his confidence actually bothered me. Like it actually bothered me because I saw it as arrogance. Right. But he was just being confident. He was like, yeah, that guy's great. And I can beat him. No problem. Like it didn't matter. He could be playing Tiger Woods. He'd be like, yeah, I can beat him. Right. And it is that being that kid had, that he carried with him, that I was not aware enough to recognize. Right. And he went on to play at the University of Maryland. Now he's a golf pro. And right. Because from the very beginning, he was being the person he needed to be in the 8 inches between your ears in order to do the things you need to do. And so, one thing we work on at Fellas You Are is before we even get into the what to say, how to say it, when to say it, it's teaching people how to think about themselves and how to draw awareness to how they're showing up. What stories are they telling themselves? What beliefs do they have? Right? And how much are they up in their head as opposed to embodying the version of them that they really want to show up as. And I think that more than anything, that disconnect is where that's where all the inauthenticity comes, is through that disconnect, especially in sales, entrepreneurship, relationships, everything.
I say this is probably one of the biggest issues that when people come to our retreats, when, we're working with you one-on-one, and even in our personal journey, I know we've talked about this, a very good amount, just of like supporting each other there. How do we get out of this big old dome of ours? Our brain likes to think about the thoughts that we're thinking about, right? And it starts to loop. And oftentimes, obviously our brain is incredibly wonderful and resourceful. It figures shit out for us in really powerful ways. And it's, I would almost say not even half of the genius and wisdom that we actually have the opportunity to tap into. Because we see this so many times when a sales rep is trying to think about how to respond to an objection, right? Trying to think about the best way to tell a story, try to think about, how to negotiate. It's like, it comes from this mental, tonality where it's just like, oh, and that's where it's like, as a prospect or as a teammate or as somebody who's being led by a leader thinking this way, you're like, oh man, this person's just trying to manipulate me, or this person's got an agenda, or man, I am not feeling genuine connection or heart flow with this person because they're coming so much from their just head. But when we actually have the ability to drop more into that being, one way to describe that, right, is drop more into our bodies, right? To drop into the somatic intelligence of what your heart is telling you. Drop into the intelligence of, oh, my gut just doesn't feel like this is right, or my gut, is, tight, whatever it might be. And so often we're trying to think about how to work through a situation where, we call it dropping into your seat of essence, right? It's like the part like in your hips almost. It's like allowing us just to ground down in there. And then whatever we're supposed to say, how we're supposed to respond, whether we're supposed to ask a question or tell a story or whatever it might be, it will naturally come, not because we're thinking about it, but because we're dropped just simply more in. And you and I have, I'll say this last thing and I'll let you kind of chime back in, but you and I have a code word called pineapple for each other, that when one of us is about to go on stage and give a talk, or we have a big sales call, whatever it might be, we're like, hey, don't forget pineapple, which essentially is just like, hey, brother, drop into your seat. Like drop into your, the intelligence that's actually within your body versus just trying to think your way through this sort of thing here.
Yeah, man. It is, and it is such an interesting, in the retreats that we host, these immersions for Illuvians, it is always so fascinating to see over the course of the time people are there, watching them drop more and more into their seat, right? Like into their knowing. I like to refer to it like not your thinking goes on your head, but like your knowing is like in your body. And I remember just recently on the last immersion that we threw, one of the participants said, I was having a conversation with her and she said, I think I feel. She was like, I think I feel upset about, and I was like, well, time out. Like, did you just hear what you said? We're so much up in our head that we actually utter phrases like, I think I feel. It's like, no, what do you actually feel? Like, you're not even feeling it. You're just thinking about what you're feeling. And there is such a, when you're able to drop into that knowing, there's such a sense of grounded presence in that, and a confidence in that, and a safety and a security in that. When we get up in our head, we feel so unmoored by things. And it's like, almost like we're a buoy floating away, right? And we can't quite get back. And so getting into our body allows us to be so much more grounded and to speak so much more freely and with our truth. I was on a retreat 2 weeks ago with a woman, and she was trying to figure out what she should do about something. She wanted to stop doing this thing, but she was afraid of what people would think, etc. And I said, like, can I just take you through, I don't know, like 5 or 10 minutes of a meditation? And she was like, yeah, sure. And so we did, and I took her through a meditation to like fully drop her in to her body, into her feet, right? Her knowing. And then I just said, so should you keep throwing this family gathering? And just without hesitation, she was like, absolutely not. And I was like, but what about what they'll think? She was like, doesn't matter. They'll get over it. Mm. And it was it was crazy. It's a different person. Because the one I was talking to when we first started discussing it was a woman who was up in her head. And 10 minutes later, it was a woman who was like fully dropped into her body. Mm. And she just knew. And it just came right out. And that is powerful. It's a transmission that people can feel, prospects can feel it, clients can feel it. Mm-hmm. It is really powerful. And that's something that they can't quite put their finger on, but they will be able to pick up from you that you are different. You're different. And people are attracted to that, really attracted to it. And you're bringing up something that,
we talk about a lot within our community. I know you talk a lot with your Sell As You Are clients as well. It's your presence is the greatest gift you can give to anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's an opportunity cost to it. If you're present with somebody, you literally can't do anything else. Truly present, right? We're not talking about multitasking, texting, or doing Slack while you're on a Zoom call with somebody, where it might be, but truly heart open, facing them, looking at them in the eyes, like that is, it's crazy to say that is a unique differentiator when you are truly present with somebody. And I want to just like bring a little clarity to something too. What Chris and I are talking about, we're not saying stop being the doer, right? We're not saying don't go out and try to achieve and build your company, crush your quota, make a shit ton of money, whatever it might be. Like, I'm raising my hand right now. I want to do that. I want to build a certain lifestyle for myself and for my family, right? I want to be able to provide whatever that might be. But also, I want to experience the joy of the present moment while I'm actually doing that. One of the easiest ways that I've actually found for people to bring more presence into their life is simply don't look at your phone when you wake up right away, and go and have some sort of practice, right? And that practice could be meditation. That practice could be breath work. That practice could be journaling. That practice could be going on a run. Honestly, I don't really care. But do something that allows you to simply check in on your body and to feel, hey, what's going on with me right now? And oftentimes, like for me, in my practice every single morning when I go and meditate, I go to my body and I just witness, hey, my stomach is tight. My shoulders are tense. My heart feels heavy, right? My scalp feels really tight right now because I have a headache, whatever it might be. And then from there, saying, cool, what are the emotions that I'm feeling right now? Right? Oh man, I'm feeling angry. Like, I don't know, there's a part of me that feels angry. There's a part of me that feels just sad right now. There's a part of me that feels tired, right? Whatever it really is. And the key thing here, it's not necessarily to try to change it, right? It's not to try to say like, okay, I'm feeling angry. Let's stop feeling angry. How do I stop feeling angry? It's actually just to allow yourself to bring a sense of self-connection and self-awareness to how your body is feeling, what emotions might be there. And then from there, it's just like, allow that to happen, right? There's this wonderful saying that says what's coming is going. And essentially it's like, hey, these parts of us, these emotions are actually coming up essentially to move through us. But the problem that I see so many people get effed up with is if if there's a part of them that feels sad, they try to push it down so they don't feel it, right? If there's a part of them that feels angry, they try to stifle it or suffocate it so that they don't feel that anger because it's scary. I don't know what's going to happen there, whatever it might be, right? And what happens, and when we push that sort of stuff down, it starts to just ferment. It starts to alchemize into something that it's not even what it is. And when we're talking to prospects or talking to clients, we try to put on this face of, hey, I'm great. I'm always great. Look how happy of a person that I am. When underneath that, we actually feel really shitty for whatever reason. That's where we're out of rapport with ourselves. We're wearing a mask and not being authentic with what's truly there. And that's where the burnout starts to happen. That's where the exhaustion starts to occur.
Yeah, and not only that, you're absolutely right. And prospects can feel it. And clients can feel it. And you can feel it. I've had to make some changes in my business as like our family. We've gone through changes in my family, and those changes in my family have prompted me to do more doing in the business, right? And I'm like you, I'm a doer, man. I'm a doer. Like my problem is how much I love doing. Like that's my problem, because I can get really caught up in the doing and not settle into the being. And I was having a conversation with my wife just 2 nights ago as we were getting ready to go to bed, and it was just a rough day. And she asked me, she said, you're not yourself tonight. Like, what's going on? And I told her, I said, and it was because from the moment I woke up, I was distracted by things, early wake up, earlier than I expected with the kids. And then I had a call that began at 6 a.m. because I'm on the West Coast. And then it was just like, one thing after another, after another, after another. And I told her, I said, my old programming keeps telling me that in order for me to get the business from where it is to where we desire it to be, there needs to be more doing. Like there needs to be more doing. And that's a yes and. I said, but I cannot do this stuff without being the version of me that can hold it all and can do it from the right place. And, we just talked about like what types of boundaries can I create in our family life that gives me the space to really get time with myself, to really be able to combine the spiritual aspects of presence and being with the very human aspects of doing, right? Because those two things need to come together, right? In the law of attraction, it talks about like sending the thought, sending the signal out, the feeling, bringing it back, right? But going out in the world and embodying it is the validation the universe or God or whoever needs to provide it to you. Right. It's one of those things where it's just like anyone else. It's like the universe is like, well, you talk a big game, but like you say you believe it. But if you really want to find out what someone believes, you just look at what they do. And that will tell you what they believe. Because we always do what we believe to be in our best interest, what we believe to be in our best interest. So it's aligning like how on Monday I could really feel I was not in alignment with myself. And that bled over to my, relationship with my wife and my kids, my clients. And, when you're able to balance those two things, what you're able to do is you're able to develop the capacity to hold the doing. You're able to develop the capacity to hold the interpersonal conflict. You're able to embody the courage to challenge someone, to do something that scares you. Because more often than not, we're not afraid of doing things. And this is something that it took me a while to learn, but really transformed my perception on my comfort zones when I realized it. Is for me, I was not afraid of doing something. I was actually afraid of the fear of doing it. My avoidance didn't come from being afraid of doing the thing, right? From a sales perspective, let's insert cold calls as the thing, right? That's something that salespeople, don't particularly like doing. So most sales professionals are not afraid of making the cold calls. They're actually afraid of feeling the feeling of fear as they pick up the phone and as they make the dial. It's not the call itself. It's the feeling that's coursing through their body as they're making the call. So what you described in your morning practice, and mine is similar, is when you're able to feel the fear, you're able to spread it over your body, you're able to recognize it, you're able to become really familiar with it. All of a sudden, it's not the monster under the bed, right? It's like all of a sudden you see it, you experience it, you're familiar with it. It begins to lose its power. And then it begins to slowly transmute into real courage, right? Real courage, like sustained courage. And that's what we want to try to do. But it can't just come from, we all know those people who are like, well, just think more positively. Just think more positively. Just think more positively. And it's like, yes. Like sometimes in sports, when I'm parenting my kids, sometimes there is a time to rub dirt on it. And sometimes there's a time to let it breathe.
Yeah.
And if you do all of letting it breathe, then you're not going to be doing enough doing in the world to achieve what you want. And if you do way too much of rubbing dirt on it, you're not going to be doing enough being. And it's just going to limit you more than you even realize. And that's the problem, that you and I have discovered is like, we realize how much we're being limited by not creating that sacred third.
Yeah.
And it's actually scary to us when you and I have drawn enough awareness and had enough conversations about it. Because the version of me a couple years ago would have thought Monday was just another day. And I'm just tired because I worked a lot. But I was exhausted because I wasn't present. And because I wasn't really dropped into my body and being. And that's what actually exhausted me. And I was like, I can't achieve the things I want to achieve with this type of disconnection.
Well, what you're speaking to there is not just presence being the greatest gift you can give to other people. Presence is the greatest gift you can give to yourself.
Yes.
Right? Of actually allowing yourself to feel whatever is there. Like, oh shit. Like, I feel that fear. And this is also why I love doing things that actually put us outside of our comfort zone. This is why cold plunges are so powerful. This is why doing things like breath work is so powerful, right? And there's so many other different types of modalities, whatever you want to talk through there of like, hey, go to your edge, dog. Like, do something that actually does scare you, that you say, that's edgy. That's not comfortable. Because when you start to go to your edge, right, and you just sit in it, right? Let's keep cold plunges as an example. It's 40-degree water, right? You go and you sit in 40-degree water for 3 minutes, for 180 seconds. That is not an enjoyable experience. But when you choose to say, this doesn't feel good, and I'm just going to like hang out in this area that's just like not super enjoyable, what actually occurs is, number one, you start to increase your capacity, right? You start to increase the amount of stress or weight that you can actually hold. What also happens is when it comes time to do other hard things, like have that very big meeting, right? Or hold firm to the pricing that the CFO is asking you to drop, right? Whatever it might be, you're like, you know what? Hold. Sit in this. I'm somebody who's allowing myself to go into the discomfort. That's just, you're essentially changing the belief system that you have about yourself. Another way of saying that, you're changing your identity. Right? And when you do that, that's where that being starts to occur. one thing that you were also talking about that I really, want to just kind of thread on a little bit too, it's like starting to put out the vibrations of the person that you want to become. There's the classic, statement we've all heard. It's like, dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's actually power to that statement, because it's saying, hey, I eventually want to be a CEO. Let's just say, like, whatever it might be. And my version of a CEO, let's just say, wears a suit and a tie. Right. So if I choose to wear that when I'm still a lower level SMB, small to medium business, account executive, right, I'm actually starting to come from the vibration, come from the energy, the tonality, the frequency, whatever it is that you want to call it, that actually starts to change just essentially how not only I perceive myself, but therefore how other people perceive me. I actually had this done to me yesterday. I saw one of my coaches, and she took me through a visualization and took me to the point where Alluviance is a multiple seven-figure business, right? And she's like, okay, how many clients does Alluviance have? I'm like, it has 500 clients. It has this many people in our upper level program. It has 20 corporate clients, right? All sorts of stuff. And she essentially was like, cool, what does that actually feel like in your body as you're feeling that? And I was like, damn, like I feel loose. My heart feels super open. I feel like energized, right? It was just like, it was such a powerful thing to say, like, man, what does it actually feel like? Right. And then the final thing she asked me, she's like, cool, now that you know what it feels like, how can first off you have some sort of practice that puts you into this state? And second off, she's like, and also once you're in this state, what's one thing you can do? What's the one thing you can actually do? Because I'm not saying just go into that state and it's automatically going to happen, right? This is, again, that combination between the being and the doing. Yeah. First off, you need to embody that version of yourself that you want to be, right? And then also, you need to execute. You need to go out and actually do it. If you want to close deals, you have to make those cold calls. But you can be embodying the version of yourself as the CEO and making those cold calls. And guess what? Just like you are saying, Chris, that prospect, whether or not they realize it, they feel it. They're like, this person is different here.
Yep, they absolutely do. And, it is that there's a great book called The As If Principle, which I read a couple years ago. And it is acting as if, right? Like, okay, so if you had the belief that that vision was going to come to fruition and that was going to happen, and all you needed to do was do the things right in front of you that you needed to do in order for that vision to happen, would you do them? And it's like, well, hell yeah, I would. It's like, okay, well, then go do them. It's like if Alex Kremer 3 years from now has this business and these amount of clients and this amount of revenue and this type of life with his family, and all Alex Kremer today has to do is just do the things in front of him each day to get him there, would you do them? It's like, well, yeah, absolutely. And the visualization exercises are so powerful because you tap into the feeling, because everything we do is for a feeling. And that's the reason why, one of the reasons why it's so important to get out of our head and into our body, because you begin to understand and draw awareness around why you're doing the things you're doing. Because everything we do is for a feeling. Everything is a feeling, right? It's a feeling. And so, I don't, when a lot of times I'll walk around in bare feet here in Southern California, and every now and then I'll be like, I should wear sandals like to the coffee shop or shoes or whatever, right? And it's not because I'm going to be uncomfortable walking into the coffee shop without shoes on. But what gets into my head? Oh, gee, someone may say something. And then I'll feel embarrassed. Well, I don't want to feel embarrassed, so I'll just put my sandals on. Right? It's like, it's silly things like that without even realizing it, we make all these choices throughout our day based on how we feel. And what keeps us from really going after our dreams and really putting ourselves out there, and I can speak very confidently to this because I've been an expert at avoiding these things, right? Like I'm very good
strong pedigree of avoiding the feelings that I meant to feel. So.
Exactly. Like I'm not as good as I used to be, right? I've been working on it, but I'm still pretty good. Is when we drop into our bodies, what happens is we don't have our stories run amok. And the stories that we create in our minds is what paralyzes us in the present moment. Right. And so, and we even see it, Alex, like when we run the immersions, people are like, I mean, it's like we're teaching them these principles and they're feeling amazing. And then they'll get up into their head and be like, well, gosh, am I going to have to like stop hanging out with all my high school friends? Like, well, what am I going to do? I want to do big things in the world. Do I have to go back and quit my job? Right. And it's like, whoa, slow down, dude, slow down. Right. But it's those stories that keep us from actually leaning in. And the stories all bounce around up in our head. So like that example of that woman I put through that meditation, all we did by dropping into her body is she just turned the stories off and could just answer me immediately on what she wanted to do. And so when we can turn those stories off and we can be fully present, what happens is it creates a strength within us to hold challenging and difficult things. Because we've all had those circumstances in which a colleague, a friend, a family member is trying to convince us why the situation we're experiencing is actually a huge disaster and really terrible and apocalyptic, and we should be freaking out. And we're just not. And we're like, no, this is fine. It'll be okay. I can handle this. And that quality is the quality that every greatest athlete has. The quality of not having their stories running amok and just being present and in the flow, right? And saying like, I can handle this. This can be handled. I have the capacity and the strength to not only handle this, but actually show up with such a strength of knowing that it makes the other individual feel safe. And that is the most influential thing you can do. Right. But it begins with you.
You know, I'm trying to remember what the movie was. I want to say it's like the Legend of Bagger Vance. I think it's a golf movie. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it's like a Matt Damon movie.
Yes, it is The Legend of Bagger Vance. That's written by Stephen Pressfield.
Okay, perfect. Of course you know it. Where he tunes everything out. Right when it's time for him, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is the correct movie that I'm going back to, but when it's
I think you're on the right track.
You know, when it's time for him to go and hit the golf ball, right? When there's thousands and thousands of people watching him, it's very easy. And I've seen, you've seen baseball movies like this too, where it's just the pitcher and he just sees the catcher, he doesn't even see the batter. It's just going into like extreme focus, almost a flow state, that they're not in their freaking dome, right? Yeah. They're in this, like, in their body. They're not even feeling they're just like going through it. It's like, I think it was Michael Jordan, the flu game, or it was in the playoffs where it's like he went into a serious flow state when he had like this gnarly flu. And one of the reasons, I'm assuming, is like he couldn't even think at that point. And he had trained so much and his body was so conditioned to be doing the right motions that it just happened. And like, this is, I think, like one of the key things that, we teach a lot of, people is like, hey, when you are feeling yourself starting to think about the thoughts you're thinking about, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to overcome the suggestion, whatever it might be. It's like dropping your body, going to what we call 360 awareness, which is like actually expand your field and invoke your definition of love, right? It's, it's called 3 steps to connection. Feel your body, 360 awareness, expand your field. And number 3, invoke your definition of love. And Rob Renahan is our teacher who taught us and came up with that practice right there. But it's a way that actually drops and moves you downwards from being just up in those synapses that are connecting in your brain up there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the only reason I know who wrote the book, The Legend of Bagger Vance, is because he's one of my favorite all-time authors. And he wrote The War of Art, and he wrote a book called Turning Pro. He also wrote the book Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit. It's all about, like, so many of his books later in his career, press field, were all about exactly what we're talking about here. How do you combine the being and the doing? And he tells a funny story about one day when he was poor as hell and he just dragged his typewriter around from shack to shack, and he just couldn't get anything going in his writing career. And if he was picking strawberries in the summer to try to save money so he could write over the winter. And he said one day he got up from his chair, went to the sink and did the dishes. And he did the dishes. And after he did the dishes, he was like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I just did the dishes. I can handle this. Right. And it was just all of a sudden it clicked. He just began being a person who could handle it. A little thing like that. And then, of course, he went on to write The Legend of Bagger Vance and the book that the movie 300 is based off of. And it's become wildly famous. But was a poor, truly starving writer for 15 or 20 years. And it just something clicked in him. And that movie, The Legend of Bagger Vance, and the book is a spiritual book. Because if, it's been many years since I've seen the movie, and it sounds like you also, but in the movie, Will Smith, the caddy, talks about how the perfect swing is inside of you. You don't have to think it. You don't have to figure it out. It's already in there.
We need a movie night, Chris, you and I.
Yeah, we do.
Over.
We do.
You better get some popcorn ready. We're going to crush that movie.
It sounds good, man. Right? But that's exactly what we're talking about here. And Will Smith in that movie, as the caddy, was like, you have to stop thinking so much. You have to just start being Bagger Vance. Be him. The perfect swing is already there. Stop getting in your own way. Drop into your body. Feel yourself. Be fully present with yourself. Fully present, and step up to the ball and swing.
Here's what I'll say. The world is massively changing right now. AI is changing everything. Crypto is changing everything. Corporate's changing. Everybody and their mother has a side gig. The world is getting hotter than ever. Political, you name it. Everybody can feel it. Something's happening here.
Yep.
And what humans, I truly believe, are being called forward into more than ever is to more of that being. Whether you want to call it your consciousness, whether you want to call it your heart, whether you want to call it more of just your emotional intelligence, because AI can already automate a lot of shit, right? And we're at the very beginning of AI. What's going to differentiate us? It's the being, it's the feeling, it's the heart flow connection that we can have with people. That's going to be our differentiation. And people need to start, because if they haven't started, guess what? You're already behind, because there's a movement that's actually occurring here.
Yep. Yeah, and we see that in our immersions. When we bring people to the immersions, they begin to feel it. When we help drop them in and they feel what it feels like to come from that place, there's sort of a, oh shit, realization of wow. And the reality is people are going to become more distracted. AI is going to be able to do more things. People are going to become even less grounded, more anxious, et cetera, et cetera. The people who are going to lead us forward are going to be the people who are grounded in their knowing, who are putting out that vibration, who have created a capacity to handle so much more, because our capacity to handle things has plummeted over the last 20 or 30 years with all these distractions. And I can say that as a parent after my children just watch a half hour of a screen. Their ability to handle difficult things has plummeted. And we are no different. And so the more we can embody our knowing, our power, our courage, our confidence, our truth, and sit and stand in that and have the capacity to handle it and hold it. Those are the people who are going to truly lead the next generation. And I believe that very strongly. And I know you do too. Right. And that is what people are being called forward into. The two of us included, who are both in our work and practicing it.
All right, Chris, I got to say, you have officially passed the test. I will, in fact, invite you back to another podcast.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that. I've been on pins and needles the whole time. I haven't been in my being at all. I've just been thinking about whether or not you like me.
Depends on the day, but today I happen to like you. So,
oh, good. Okay.
Well,
great.
Chris, I just want to say, man, I just appreciate you for being on here, for bringing your heart, for bringing your truth as always. If people want to follow you and get a hold of you and say, I got to, double click in this guy's brain a little bit or his heart a little bit, let's call it that. What is the best way to do so, my friend?
Just find me. LinkedIn is my main platform. So I have stuff on IG and Facebook and TikTok, but I personally am on LinkedIn. That's where I like to stay. So just Chris Caldwell. There are a lot of us out there. I'm the one who lives in Capo Beach, California, who owns Sell As You Are. So that one's me.
I love it. And if you
just shoot me a DM, connect with me.
And if you want to come hang out with Chris and myself, come check out one of our Alluvian Submersions. We'd love to have you and support you. So
yes, can't wait, man.
With that, thank you for joining us, y'all.